There's no night in eternity. Maybe we'll be awake forever. Everything is totally different than what we experience here, naturally in the flesh. So what would it be like there? We're going to have bodies that walk through walls and can fly. How amazing and wonderful is it going to be? What will it be? Wow, we can't even imagine how incredible it's going to be. Can you think of this? No night, being awake forever, not getting tired, no tears, no hurt, no pain. Oh, how incredible.
We're here to praise you tonight, Yahusha, and hear your truth, and to learn from you, and to know what to do and when to do it, so we can do what you want us to do and tell people what you want us to tell. And we want you to bless us tonight and help us to see what you're trying to tell us. And we just want to keep loving you and feeling your love all the time, every day. And you're just so fabulous and amazing. And we never want to lose this feeling. And we ask that you help us throughout the day in everything, so we can be with you when you come back, and we can just keep loving you and praising you. So be it.
So I just want to go through quickly, because it kind of left on a cliffhanger last week, didn't it? Did he make it to Rome? Did he not? There are lots of sources that say that Luke wrote Luke wrote more accounts of what Paul was doing, but they never saw the light of day. So anyway, I'll just take you through this quickly in animated form. Eventually, Paul was released. Remember, he was in prison, and made his final journey to many cities. Among them were Corinth, Miletus, Troas, Crete, Ephesus, and as prophesied, Philippi. Meanwhile, in Rome, this is where Paul was, Emperor Nero grew more and more corrupt and started a great fire. Many believe Nero started it to make room for a more opulent palace. He blamed the fire on Yahusha's followers, successfully turning public opinion against the Nazarene, that's Yahusha's followers. Nero outlawed Yahusha's followers, the Nazarene. A systematic persecution of Nazarene followed. This is where you hear about believers being thrown to the lions. Nero put Nazarene in the arena with lions, sometimes dressing them in bloody animal skins. Nero impaled Yahusha's people at special public gatherings, and even ordered that believers be lit as torches for the palace grounds. And some even viewed him as the anti-Messiah. Because remember, they all thought they were living in the last days. They didn't know there was going to be another 2,000 odd years. So the cruelty of this emperor So the day Peter and Paul spoke of came soon. They knew their life wasn't going to last very long preaching this dangerous message. So the day Peter and Paul spoke of came soon. First for Peter, he was taken and they wanted to impale him, and later Paul was taken. As you can see there, they came and took Paul. It was time for Paul. By order of Emperor Nero, Simon Peter is sentenced to death. Peter says, I am unworthy to die in the same way as Yahusha. So he says, I have a favour to ask. He does not want to be killed the same way Yahusha was killed, so he asks to be hung upside down. And it wasn't a cross, it was just a stake. But imagine that. Hard enough being impaled as it is, upside down. I don't know. It might come up later, mate. I don't know. There's a little bit of writing coming up. It's all right, Justice, my friend. Remember the good news I shared with you. And this Roman soldier says, I can't put your head on the block, Paul. I will not. Paul says, you don't have to. He puts it on himself. And Nero orders for his head to be cut off. So Paul lost his head. Time of Nero, yeah. This was all around the time of Nero. And Luke's writing this. He says, that day the worst man in the world faced the best man. I saw one man possessed by Satan, prince of darkness, and the other possessed by Yahusha, creator of light and king over all. Interestingly, what happened next, but soon the man who ordered the end of my friend's life, Paul, General Calbal is nearing Rome. The Senate has declared you a public enemy. They say you must be executed. So the nation's turning against Nero. So Nero, facing the end of his own life, while mobs assembled and his world crumbled around him, Nero weighed his options and killed himself. So that's what Nero did. Powerless against his many enemies, the so-called God, Nero, killed himself. Nero killed countless Yahusha followers. The blood of the martyrs seeded the new fellowship. Intending to crush the gospel, Yahusha's enemies actually helped it spread. Because when they were persecuted, they spread out, took the message with them. 2 years after Nero's death, the Roman general Titus, this is the time, there you go. 2 years after Nero's death, the Roman general Titus, which was AD 70, so it was a couple of years before that Paul died. General Titus came and destroyed Jerusalem. The last of the city's Yahusha worshippers were scattered, and the movement spread throughout the empire and beyond. They went from Jerusalem and they spread out, and they went from Rome and they spread out. The movement went deeper and deeper underground and was eventually snuffed out through Roman persecution. The story of Paul and Yahusha's mighty act is almost over, and yet it continues, as the boys were saying. It continues. A Pharisee who once would never eat with non-Jews became teacher to the whole world. Yahusha's new bridal covenant is not only for Jews anymore, but it includes people of every tribe, language, nation and language. So that's just kind of what happened to Paul and what happened to Peter. You can have a quick look here. This is how each of the emissaries, apostles, were killed. Some of them are confused, so they put all of them there. Peter, we saw him, he was impaled upside down. Andrew was impaled. James was killed. John died of old age. He's not here, so he died of old age. They boiled him 3 times. Philip, impaled, stoned, beheaded, old age. That was a bit funny. Well, which one was it? They don't know. So, Bartholomew, flayed like a fish. Flayed, impaled, drowned. Thomas was speared. Matthew, old age, burnt, stoned, killed, beheaded, slain. James, son of Alphaeus, was clubbed, stoned, impaled. Jude was given the axe. Simon the Zealot, impaled, sword, old age. Judas Iscariot, as we know, hung himself. Matthias, stoned, beheaded, old age, beheaded. Paul was beheaded. I just want to read a little bit here, because this is, and these are old religious documents from the early church fathers that show that they were living around the time of these guys and their deaths. So it's interesting to see the traditions. It is at this point we are dependent on accounts, because Luke finished the story. It is at this point we are dependent on accounts and traditions recorded by later Christian writers. The one unifying factor is that they all agree that Paul was martyred, quite possibly during the Neronian persecution that followed the Great Fire of Rome. So we've heard that twice now. Great Fire. Paul was killed straight after. Although short on details relating to Paul's actual death, the first century 1 Clement, thought to have been written around 96-97 CE, states this. These are all Alexandrian early church fathers, the catechetical school guys. He says, owing to envy, Paul also obtained the reward of patient endurance after being 7 times thrown into captivity, compelled to flee and stoned. After preaching both in the East and West, he gained the illustrious reputation due to his belief, having taught righteousness to the whole world, and come to the extreme limit of the West and suffered martyrdom under the prefects. Thus was he removed from the world and went into the set-apart place, having proved himself a striking example of patience. That's what one guy says. A few decades later, much more detailed accounts begin to emerge. The apocryphal 2nd century Acts of Paul gives this rather colourful account of Paul's execution, following his unwitting part in the death of Nero's cupbearer, Patroclus. And this guy says, then Paul stood with his face to the east and lifted up his hands unto heaven and prayed a long time. And in his prayer he conversed in the Hebrew tongue with the fathers, and then stretched forth his neck without speaking. And when the executioner, speculator, struck off his head, milk spurted upon the cloak of the soldier. And the soldier and all that were there present, when they saw it, marvelled and esteemed Yahuwah, which had given such esteem unto Paul. And they went and told Caesar what was done. So that's another thing that's been written. A much more restrained reference comes from one of the early church fathers, Clement of Alexandria, in the collection of his writings, the Stromata. However, it also helps to securely locate it to the time of Nero. There we go. So it's the time of Nero that Paul was killed. He says, for the teaching of Yahusha at his advent, beginning with Augustus and Tiberius, was completed in the middle of the times of Tiberius. And that of the apostles, embracing the ministry of Paul, ends with Nero. So it's telling us it's the time of Nero there. Although lacking the embellishment that can be found in the Acts of Paul, the late 2nd, early 3rd century theologian and apologist Tertullian nevertheless provides a lively and characteristically pugnacious account of his martyrdom in his Scorpias. How do you say that? Scorpiace? I don't know. He says that Peter is struck, that Stephen is overwhelmed by stones, Acts 7:59, that James is slain as is a victim at the altar, that Paul is beheaded. All that has been written in their own blood. And if a heretic wishes his confidence to rest upon a public record, the archives of the empire will speak, as would the stones of Jerusalem. We read the lives of the Caesars. At Rome, Nero was the first who stained with blood the rising belief. Then is Peter girt by another, John, when he is made fast to the stake. Then does Paul obtain a birth suited to Roman citizenship, when in Rome he springs to life again, ennobled by martyrdom. So all these guys are just giving us little seed thoughts as to what happened to these guys. Next big question is, why did Luke stop? Why didn't Luke tell us about all this? Over the years, there have been proposed a number of possible reasons to explain why Luke did not include any account of Paul's death in his Acts of the Apostles. These are all the different reasons possibly. One, Luke was simply unaware of Paul's death, or that he was still alive at the time of his writing it. Two, Luke was embarrassed by the lack of support for Paul in Rome by his fellow believers. This might be hinted at those books there. Three, Luke could have assumed that his readers were already aware of Paul's death, and including it would have unnecessarily deflected attention away from his main theological aim, which was to show how the gospel message was conveyed from Jerusalem to Rome and the ends of the earth. Also, the death of two key figures, Yahusha and Paul, three including Peter, at the hands of the Roman authorities, created significant problems for the early assembly. Drawing attention to Paul's death could have been not only embarrassing, but seriously undermined Luke's pro-Roman apologetics. These are all just maybes. Then, the parallel that Luke draws between the ministry of Yahusha and that of Paul and Peter meant that he needed to be cautious lest readers drew parallels between their deaths. And this one, which was quite a popular theory, Luke planned a third volume, which would begin with Paul's death, as Acts began with Yahusha's ascension. So many think that he wrote other things, but we just never saw them. He just continued writing. Luke used, because it did end quite abruptly, didn't it? Uncharacteristically. He had so much detail and everything else, and it just finished. Luke used the abrupt ending of Mark's Gospel. This is what they say. He used the same ending as Mark's Gospel as a literary model for Acts. So you can see, even after Paul gets out of prison before his death, he does quite a bit more preaching and teaching around the place, doesn't he? This is all after what we read in Acts. According to all those writings we just read, they've made a bit of a map, and he's gotten around the place, hasn't he? And a lot of these books, 2 Timothy, other ones, all through there, are written after he left the Roman prison. And of course, we're not going to read it tonight, but Paul's final instruction, the last thing he wrote to the next generation, was the book of Timothy, 2 Timothy. So as we know, and as the boys touched on, this whole movement died out. 300 years later was the birth of organised religion under the Constantine's Catholic movement. So that went all through time, as you can see there. The Dark Age is what we call it. When all there was this, you can see down here, Islam starting to form down here. All this stuff happened here. Look at the timeline. You can see in the early 1500s, you start seeing Reformation there. It's a bit small, sorry. Reformation happens here, which is the Catholic and Protestant split, and you start seeing all these branches of religion starting to form here. And right about here, we also have the sea of apostasy happening in the world. All the lies, the whore, the harlot. What also happened a couple of decades ago, Yahuwah, the feasts, the new covenant, behaviour, and the bride's preparing, all through to today. That gives you a bit of a timeline, just briefly, of what happened. Can you see that after nearly 2,000 years of darkness, Yahushua is raising up his covenant and bride again in these last days to prepare for his soon return? What a blessing to be included with the original followers in the book of Acts and be able to live in prophetic history. We're living in prophetic history. Imagine somebody was continuing writing the books of Acts. Would they be writing about us? It's a different day and age these days, but you know what I'm saying? The story is continuing. Be able to live in prophetic history, participating in the finish of the story. We saw the beginning in Acts. We're living in the finish of it as the world comes to an end. That was it, guys. That's the book of Acts. So that was 6 months of intensity, wasn't it? Amazing. So I hope you found that encouraging. I found it encouraging. I hadn't really read the book of Acts since it was sort of pounded into us at school. And it was really good to read it fresh with a new spirit and see, just like the boys said on their video, if we start following Yahushua, all our stories are going to look very similar, aren't they? The suffering, the persecution, but also the joy as well. So that's it tonight. That's been enough. Would you like to close the meeting for me, Joe, please?
Thank you, Yahusha, for being here with us tonight as we praised you. And thank you for giving us this amazing message today. It was just amazing. All of Acts that we've been through, it's just been amazing to see what we're going through, what we're going to go through more was all happening back then. And it's just very encouraging and so amazing. And we just want to ask that you continue to bless all of us and all our family and friends, and continue to work with us and help us to grow stronger in your love. So good.
Mark, Matthew's put forth a new plan that he's got. You might be able to get out sooner.
Oh,
So could you pray for that tonight?
I certainly can. Put my mic back on.
Yahushua, we asked, we all come together in one mind, in unity, for our brother, our son, our friend. We love Matty so much, and we pray you would grant him this wonderful request, Yahushua. We know he's learnt a lot from the experience you've put him through, and we ask that you would find it time to relieve him of the worldly consequence. We know he can see. He's seen a lot of you. We ask that this procedure goes through successfully and that you would have your hand on it the whole time. And we'll continue asking because you told us to pray without ceasing and never get tired of it. We love you so much, Yahushua. So be it.
Thank you.
Mm.